Para-pa-para. 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 Papiro. Papiro.
Federico Fellini was a notoriously superstitious filmmaker who regularly sought out individuals that claimed to have a connection to the paranormal. In 8½, we see an example of these Fellinian beliefs in the scene with the magician who can read people's thoughts without really knowing how. When Guido, the film's protagonist, asks him a specific question, the magician responds that something happens. Additionally, Guido is associated with apotropaic gestures and objects, such as the little dance he performs in the hallway when he's alone, or the black hat he wears, which is in a sense his superhero costume. Superhero costumes are objects that transform the character's identity, radically changing their ability to intervene in the world. However, the same can be said of fashion. The presence of a fashion brand's magic word inscribed on the body of the person transforms their social status, self-esteem, seductive capacity, and therefore their ability to intervene in the world. Not by chance, the looks proposed by the major brands, especially when it comes to haute couture, make the mannequins resemble fantastic animals, mythological creatures, beings that surpass the human. In what ways do fashion objects enhance individuality, and how do they also consume it? Who are the models we see walking on the runway? Are they just masks or puppets? Or is their image a portal that allows the audience to access a different perception of their own individuality? An individuality that, of course, can only be accessed if one has the economic resources. Some objects are so important in people's lives because they allow access to another dimension, making them magical. In literary or cinematic narratives, some objects cause events to evolve in a way that humans cannot control. These objects do not necessarily have an understandable meaning. Sometimes they are simply there. In The Maltese Falcon by John Huston, the object that gives the film its title is the motive of the drama. At the end of the film, Humphrey Bogart, who plays the protagonist, describes the object as made of the stuff that dreams are made of. In German expressionist cinema and film noir, as we saw in the case of The Maltese Falcon, the director's gaze sometimes lingers on close-ups of objects that are both exemplary and enigmatic. This also happens in Hitchcock's films, where he calls these objects MacGuffin and often focuses on them in the shots, as if they have a life of their own, such as the envelope of money that appears in Psycho before the girl's murder. In Diary of a Lost Girl by Pabst, the evil and perverse governess of a girls' college plays a gong to set the rhythm of the physical exercise and gets excited by the sound it produces. In the scene, Pabst gives the object the role of the protagonist to the extent that the object is the medium between the governess's desire and the bodies of the girls. Sometimes, the objects that drive the narration and the desire of the protagonists remain invisible for most of the time, like in the case of The Maltese Falcon, but at times they are put so prominently that the people who should be finding them can't see them. This is the case in Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Purloined Letter, which follows Dupin as he helps a minister recover a stolen letter. The minister had searched the thief's apartment several times but failed to find the letter. Dupin, however, locates it quickly, having discovered that the letter had been hiding in plain sight among other letters and documents piled haphazardly on the thief's desk.
Then close your eyes and tap your heels together 3 times. And think to yourself, there's no place like home.
These objects can exercise their influence in various ways, positively or negatively. For example, we can see that 2 very similar magical objects exert opposite influences, such as in the case of the red shoes that in The Wizard of Oz allowed Dorothy to return home, and the opposite case of the red shoes in The Red Shoes by Powell and Pressburger that possess the dancer, leading her to tragedy. As Lermontov, the film's villain, says, "Life rushes by, but the red shoes dance on." In this film, the Red Shoes have a demonic presence that so radically influences the life of the protagonist as to usurp her identity and her will. What would happen to Guido in 8½, if he were without the objects that identify him, such as his hat, glasses, and fancy clothes? Are these objects helping him return home like Dorothy's red shoes? Or are they objects that lead him almost against his will, like the red shoes of Powell and Pressburger? Let's ask ourselves, have there been objects in our lives that have influenced us to this point, so powerful that they allow us to return home or guide our will to do things we didn't believe we could do? In Kleinian psychoanalysis, the good object and the bad object are distinguished based on their effects on the individual. The good object offers comfort and support, while the bad object may be persecutory, as in the case of the two different red shoes. We can also think of some characteristics of children's toys that sometimes scare and sometimes cheer and comfort, taking on a life of their own and acting positively or negatively towards their owners, as in the parallel cases of the dolls in John Lasseter's Toy Story and Tom Holland's Child's Play. Feminist art performance often centers on defining identity through the use of magical gestures and spells that aim to redefine symbolic reality. In a patriarchal society that has long suppressed women's voices and experiences, feminist artists seek to challenge existing power structures and create a new reality where women are heard and valued. One way that feminist art performance achieves this goal is by drawing on the concept of magic as a means of tapping into the power of the imagination. Through artistic performances that involve ritualistic gestures and incantations, feminist artists aim to create new narratives and challenge existing power structures. For example, feminist artist Judy Chicago created the iconic work The Dinner Party in the 1970s, which is a symbolic representation of famous women throughout history. Each place setting incorporates elements that symbolize the achievements and power of that particular woman, and the installation is meant to challenge the male-dominated art world's reluctance to honor women artists. In general, art is composed of objects believed to have a particular influence on living beings. While in ancient art, this type of influence can be thought of as magical, in modern and contemporary art, this influence is aesthetic, but no less important. What is the difference between magic and artistic beauty? As in the case of the trick that is not a trick by the magician in 8½, we know that there is something that links them, but we don't know exactly what. We have all experienced being so fascinated by a portrait that we become hypnotized. For example, we see the cult of Leonardo's Mona Lisa at the Louvre, a cult that seems to be more magical religious than aesthetic. This extreme fascination that works of art can provoke offers artists, especially brilliant ones, a power that can be abused, creating a personal cult in which their dominant personality can exercise limited power over the circle of so-called faithful, or can put art and its fabulatory power at the service of evil dictatorships. In 8½, Fellini simultaneously exposes this power, but also reveals it naked in its structure, perhaps seeking to exorcise it. By showing the process of film production that takes place before our eyes, he makes it clear that he is fooling us with a magician's trick. But even if we can see the trick, we are still dazzled by what he shows us. So perhaps the ultimate magical object, which even precedes the work of art, if not in a historical sense, at least in our individual experience, is the toy, an object that, with its evocative power, allows a child to create a parallel world, as we see in Albert Lamourisse's film The Red Balloon. The toy, misunderstood by adults, is the door that allows the child to access another space, another time. It is made of the stuff that dreams are made of,